In the final years of the 1400s, when the world was shifting, kingdoms rising and falling, and new empires emerging from the ashes of old ones, somewhere deep inside the forbidden city of China, a child was being prepared for a destiny he could never understand. His name was Zhu Hozhao. History would remember him not for wisdom, not for peace, not for leadership, but as the emperor who threw away the world for pleasure, thrill, and madness. He would become known simply as the Zhengde Emperor, a name whispered with fascination, horror, and disbelief. But before the scandals, before the secret city, before the kidnappings and nighttime hunts, before the crimes and the chaos, there was a boy, lonely, treasured, and trapped in golden chains. Zhu Hozhao became emperor at just 14 years old, far too young to rule, far too unprepared to understand the weight of a world resting on his shoulders. While other boys were learning to fight or run or dream, he was learning how to bow and how to obey. Every movement watched, every word measured. He was not raised like a child. He was raised like a symbol. And symbols are not allowed to feel. The court expected him to be the perfect ruler, disciplined, responsible, wise beyond his years. But behind their expectations was something far more dangerous. A boy who had never known freedom. And the moment he got a taste of it, he would consume it like a man dying of thirst. From the very beginning, the palace elders made the greatest mistake of all. They believed that by controlling the boy completely, they could shape him into the emperor they wanted. So they locked him in ceremony, drowned him in rituals, isolated him from fun, friendship, adventure, or anything that felt alive. They created what they thought was order, but they were really creating a storm that would one day swallow the empire itself. When Zhu Hozhao first sat on the throne, he didn't even understand the documents he was signing. He was a puppet emperor surrounded by adults who ruled in his name. They treated him like a child who happened to wear a crown, not a ruler. And every time they dismissed him, every time they lectured him, every time they rolled their eyes at his questions, something inside him twisted a little deeper. Humiliation, anger, rebellion, all quietly growing. He began to realize something life-changing. He was the emperor, yet he had no control. The throne was his, but his life was not. And that thought, that unbearable contradiction, became the seed of his madness. One night, at 15 years old, he sneaked out of his chambers. No guards, no servants, just a boy wandering the palace trying to feel something real. He found a courtyard lit by lanterns. He found silence instead of lectures, moonlight instead of rules. And for the first time, Zhu Hozhao felt alive. That single moment of freedom changed him. From that night forward, he craved not responsibility, not greatness, not legacy, but sensation, thrill, escape. Anything that broke the suffocating walls he had been raised within. He started slipping out more often. First inside the palace grounds, then past the gates, wearing disguises prepared by servants too afraid to refuse him. Dressed as a commoner, he wandered the city streets, tasting what ordinary life felt like. No one bowed. No one lectured. No one controlled him. It was intoxicating and deeply dangerous. And then the emperor discovered something that would push him fully over the edge. He liked power not when it was ceremonial, not when it required responsibility, but when it came without consequence. He wanted to do whatever he pleased, whenever he pleased, without restraint. So the boy emperor made a decision that would shape the future of China. If the throne could not give him freedom, he would take freedom by force. He began building friendships not with scholars or ministers, but with criminals. Thieves, street performers, gamblers, men who lived outside the law. People who made him feel alive. People who didn't care about rules. People who thought his recklessness was thrilling. Some of these men would later become his private soldiers. A secret militia with no loyalty to anyone but him. Inside the forbidden city, ministers panicked. At first they tried to hide the truth, fearing punishment for losing control of the emperor. They wrote false reports. They pretended everything was normal. But the whispers grew louder. The emperor was slipping into a darkness that no one could stop. And then came the moment that truly broke the empire's illusion. Zhu Hozhao decided he no longer wanted to live in the forbidden city. He wanted a place designed only for pleasure, only for thrill, only for him. And so, using the full force of imperial power, he ordered the construction of a massive secret compound outside the palace. A pleasure fortress, a private kingdom, an escape from the world of responsibility. It would be filled with performers, entertainers, animals, wine, weapons, women, and the emperor's growing criminal army. This forbidden kingdom would become one of the most shocking places ever created by a ruler in Chinese history. And the darkness of Zhengde's reign had only just begun. The secret compound rose from the earth like something from a fever dream. Massive walls carved with dragons, corridors lined with silk, chambers filled with music and dancers, all built not for the empire, but for a single man's escape from reality. It was called Bao Fong, the Leopard Quarter, but its true purpose was whispered only in fear, a place where the emperor could live out every desire without judgment, without limits, without the eyes of the court watching him. At first, ministers believed this was just another childish fantasy the emperor would tire of. They were wrong. This new kingdom became Zhengde's obsession. Here he wasn't a ruler. He wasn't a symbol. He was something far more dangerous, a boy with absolute power and no restraints. Surrounded by thieves, mercenaries, and performers, he created a world where he could rewrite the rules of reality itself. The emperor began giving titles to animals. A pig became a general. A goat was proclaimed a nobleman. A leopard was appointed commander of the palace guards. Court officials waited for the joke to end, but it never did. Zhengde would smile, delighted, as he watched the scholars and ministers bow to the animals he had promoted. This was not humor. It was rebellion. An emperor demonstrating that he could make the world as absurd as he wished, and no one could stop him. But the real darkness came at night. Zhengde began riding through Beijing streets disguised as a commoner. He carried a whip, sometimes a sword. Anyone who insulted him, anyone who irritated him, anyone who simply crossed his path wrong, he would have his guards seize them. Some were beaten. Some disappeared entirely. To the emperor it was a game. To the people living in terror it was a nightmare. Soon his thrill-seeking turned into something more sinister. He began kidnapping women from the city. Performers, unmarried girls, even married women, snatched from their homes and taken to his secret compound. Their families were forced to stay silent, terrified of punishment. Some women were never seen again. Behind the palace walls, the ministers begged for control. They tried to confront him, tried to reason with him. And each time the emperor responded with the same chilling truth. I am the Son of Heaven. I answer to no one. He wasn't entirely wrong. The laws bent before him. The officials trembled. The empire was helpless. And with every passing year, the emperor's appetite for danger grew sharper, darker, and more violent. He formed a private army, the Little Patrol, made up of thieves, wrestlers, and criminals loyal only to him. They patrolled the streets at night, not to protect the city but to feed his desire for chaos. They raided homes. They broke into shops. They dragged people from their beds. And if anyone resisted, the consequences were brutal. The emperor laughed as he watched arrests and punishments carried out at his command. It gave him a thrill nothing else could match. In the daytime, he turned the palace into his playground. He staged dangerous hunts inside the forbidden city, releasing tigers, leopards, and bears into the courtyards. Servants died. Guards were mauled. The emperor didn't care. The fear in their eyes was exciting, a reminder that he held their lives in his hands. One afternoon he stood on a balcony overlooking the chaos below, a tiger tearing through terrified soldiers, and he whispered to his closest companion, "Real power is the fear in another man's heartbeat." But the greatest scandal of all came when the emperor decided he wanted to experience war, not as a ruler but as a warrior hero. He invented a fake identity for himself, calling himself General Zhu, pretending he was just another officer. He wore armor, rode into battle, issued commands with no experience or training. During one campaign he nearly got himself killed, leaving his army in confusion and disorder. The officials couldn't even criticize him. How could they? He was both emperor and soldier, both ruler and hero, both child and tyrant. His double life split the empire in two, the world of the throne and the world of madness. And yet the people suffered the most. Taxes rose to pay for his fantasies. Corruption spread like wildfire. Ministers were too afraid to report the truth. When disaster struck the countryside, famine, floods, uprisings, the emperor ignored them all. He was too busy building another wing to his pleasure fortress, too busy hunting, drinking, indulging, destroying. He ruled not with policy but with impulse, not with wisdom but with desire. The once mighty Ming Dynasty began cracking under the pressure. And then one night, something happened that would push Zhengde into the deepest darkness of his reign, an event that would test his power, challenge his control, and threaten everything he had built. A rebellion broke out, and the emperor would make a decision so shocking, it would change the fate of China forever. The rebellion struck in the most humiliating way possible, swiftly, brutally, and right under the emperor's nose. A Mongol warlord led a force of raiders who crossed the northern border, swept past outposts, and stormed deep into Ming territory. Villages burned, soldiers fled, and the countryside fell into terror. Word reached the capital. The invaders were advancing toward Beijing. The empire waited for their emperor to lead. But Zhengde was not in the Forbidden City. He was drunk, celebrating another night of pleasure inside the Leopard Quarter. When news reached him, something strange happened. Something unexpected. Somewhere inside the chaos of his mind, a spark of pride ignited. The emperor, the boy who hated responsibility, the man who lived for indulgence, suddenly wanted to play the role he had abandoned. But he didn't want to face the crisis as the emperor. That was too ordinary, too boring. He wanted to face it as General Zhu, the heroic warrior he had fantasized himself to be. He dressed in armor, gathered his criminal army, and rode out of the capital in the middle of the night. Ministers were horrified. They had no control, no strategy, no idea what the emperor would do. An empire's fate hung on the impulses of one unstable man. When Zhengde reached the battlefield, chaos reigned. The Mongols were fast, brutal, and experienced. The Ming forces were confused, leaderless, and terrified. But Zhengde didn't see a crisis. He saw adventure. He saw danger. He saw a thrill greater than anything his pleasure compound could offer. He charged on horseback, shouting commands he barely understood, swinging weapons with reckless energy. His men followed only because disobedience meant death. For a moment, the emperor tasted something he had never felt before. Adrenaline, not from cruelty, not from indulgence, but from actual combat. And then fate intervened. In the frenzy of battle, Zhengde was thrown from his horse. He crashed into the mud as soldiers panicked around him. The Mongols pushed forward, and for a terrifying moment, the Emperor of China, disguised as a common general, was nearly killed. His guards barely saved him, dragging him from the field as arrows streaked the sky. The emperor was humiliated. His fantasy of being a heroic warrior shattered instantly. He returned to Beijing injured, shaken, and increasingly unstable. He shut himself inside the Leopard Quarter for days, then weeks, surrounding himself with entertainment to drown out the humiliation still burning inside him. But humiliation is a dangerous poison for a man who believes he is untouchable. It twists the mind. It sharpens paranoia. And Zhengde, already drowning in madness, began to unravel. He trusted no one. He suspected everyone. Even the criminals who formed his beloved little patrol felt his growing wrath. Loyal companions disappeared. Servants vanished. Sometimes bodies were found. Sometimes they weren't. When reports arrived that officials were quietly questioning his actions, the emperor snapped. He ordered secret punishments, silent arrests, midnight interrogations. Ministers walked through the palace in terror, whispering prayers as they waited for the emperor's unpredictable rage to fall on them. The empire was collapsing from inside. And then came the final blow, one that no one saw coming, one that revealed how fragile even the most powerful lives can be. After returning from a disastrous hunt in the southern wetlands, Zhengde fell ill. Fever overtook him, hallucinations consumed him, and the emperor who had spent his life chasing thrill after thrill now found himself unable to rise from his bed. His body, long abused by excess, began to fail. In his final days he barely recognized anyone. He raved about battles, about tigers, about conspiracies, about pleasures he could no longer touch. His once bright, reckless eyes turned hollow. The man who built an empire of chaos was now trapped in silence. And then, at just 29 years old, the Zhengde emperor, the boy who became a tyrant, the ruler who became a thrill-seeker, the child who destroyed an empire's dignity, died suddenly. His death shocked the court. Some whispered poison. Some whispered divine punishment. Some whispered a fatal accident during one of his nighttime adventures. But the truth remains locked in time. He died alone, young, and surrounded by the consequences of his own madness. The Leopard Quarter was abandoned. Many of its inhabitants vanished overnight. Ministers rushed to erase the worst scandals from official history. They rewrote documents. They hid records. They tried to present Zhengde not as a monster but as a tragic, misguided ruler. But the truth lived on in secret documents, in forbidden archives, in the memories of those who survived him. The Ming Dynasty never fully recovered. His reign weakened the empire, corrupted its institutions, and opened cracks that would grow for decades. His legacy became a warning, a chilling reminder of what happens when a child is given absolute power before he understands responsibility and chooses indulgence over duty. History remembers him not for laws passed or battles won, not for peace or prosperity, but for the terrifying, exhilarating, unbelievable life he lived. A ruler who turned the world into his playground and paid the ultimate price. Some emperors build empires. Some emperors protect them. Zhengde did neither. He destroyed his own. And his story stands as one of the most shocking tales ever told. A tragedy carved into the throne of a dynasty that never expected a boy to become its darkest nightmare.